Thank you. Appreciate the thorough answers there. Very important issue. I now recognize the full committee ranking member, Ms. Morelle, for 5 minutes for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll admit I'm a simple guy, and I do want to do some follow-ups to Mr. Loudermilk's questions, which were important. Also recognize that General Walker was held such high esteem by members of our side of the aisle. We made him the Sergeant at Arms after January 6th. So I think we have as much faith in him and had as much faith in him as all of you did during that time. The way I see this, and maybe I'm wrong, if I'm the President of the United States, the Commander-in-Chief, even though I've delegated authority, I think at some period after 3 o'clock, when I see that there doesn't seem to be much movement, I'm going to pick up the phone and call the Secretary of Defense and the Secretary of the Army and say, exactly what's going on? Well, I've issued orders, or I haven't, or there's confusion. At some point, I would have had my Chief of Staff call General Walker and say, exactly what's happening on the ground. My only point is, it would not have taken me, and I'm not sophisticated, but it wouldn't have taken me 3.5 hours while I'm sitting in the White House watching this unfold, confident in my view that, well, I've signed the necessary papers, so I'm not sure what's happening, but it's all good because I signed the papers. This is an attack on the United States Capitol, the citadel of democracy here in this country and around the world. So for all the other misdirection here, and I'm not suggesting that we're trying to bring the president into this unnecessarily. It's that the president is necessarily part of the chain of command. By the way, so is the Secretary of Defense, and so is the Secretary of the Army. So I'm not absolving them. They clearly had direct line responsibility to make sure this happened. And at some point, when this is going on, in the midst of the chaos, if only a few minutes goes by and something's not happening, I'm picking up the damn phone. I'm going to find out exactly what's going on. But to this point, so look, we have high respect, the greatest respect for General Walker. We would have continued him as Secretary or Sergeant of Arms. It was my friends over there who made the decision to remove him, and that's fine. They have that responsibility. So let me ask this, and maybe I'm not sure anyone can answer this, but let me direct it first to Sergeant Major Brooks. Tell me what the protocol should be going forward, since we're all focused on what's supposed to happen. Tell us in the future, whether it's January 6, 2025, or any other day that involves a breach of the Capitol or issues here, what's the protocol? What should we know needs to be in place that people fear wasn't? How do we make sure this doesn't happen again? What's that protocol like?
One positive step that I believe has already been taken is I believe they have given the authority to the Chief of the Capitol Police to call on the Guard without further approval. That's a huge step. Secondly, I believe that the DC National Guard has been neglected for many years for what I believe to be the lack of knowledge or understanding. It was put on a shelf. Those who were delegated authority over, the Secretary of the Army, the Secretary of Defense, did not thoroughly understand their responsibility. You know, they're ultimately one of the commanders, one of the senior leaders of the DC National Guard. Over the 17 years that I served in the DC National Guard, repeatedly, the National Guard Bureau came down and removed units, military police units that would respond to the Capitol, have removed them from the DC National Guard without objection. If the governor of your state was told they were going to move one of their Guard units, your governor would be upset and there would be a significant challenge to that, correct? The Secretary of the Army is supposed to be our governor. It's supposed to defend the DC National Guard from losing its capability to support and defend the Capitol of the United States. That has been neglected for decades, and it needs to change. The DC National Guard should be the elite unit that it was designed to be under President Thomas Jefferson. It is responsible for the seat of democracy. It's not responsible for a state, a territory. It's responsible for a city. It is the only guard that is responsible for a city. It just happens to be the capital of the most powerful nation in the world. And I think that's significant. And if that change does not come, if this happens again, and unfortunately in our political environment, I think there's a chance.
Well, and I appreciate that response, and I'm almost out of time. I would simply say this, that I also think leading up to January 6th, recognizing the tumult, recognizing the challenges, from the President to the Secretary of Defense to the Secretary of the Army, there should have been a lot of work in preparation for, not on that day, but in the weeks, months leading up to make sure the lines of communication were set and that there was a series of protocols that would be followed if and when things happened, and that clearly didn't happen as well. But again, gentlemen, appreciate all of your, not only testimony for being here today, but your long service and support of the United States. Thank you. I yield back.